Hi, I'm Jack West, medical oncologist at Swedish Cancer Institute in Seattle, and I wanted to talk about the TOPICAL trial, which was just published in Lancet Oncology and is an interesting study that asked the question of whether an unselected population of patients who are felt to be poor candidates for chemotherapy for their advanced non-small cell lung cancer might benefit from a targeted therapy like Tarceva, also known as erlotinib, an oral tyrosine kinase inhibitor of EGFR, it's called. And this study was done in the UK over most of the last decade, enrolling 670 patients with a median age of 77 and who were generally relatively frail, with a performance status of 2 or 3 typically on our Zubrod or ECOG scale of performance status, 2 to 3 being really patients who are struggling to do all of their daily activities and are up and around perhaps a little more or a little less than half the time, but really limited in their functional capacity. So this was a population that in the UK was felt to not be a strong candidate for chemotherapy, but who were randomized to receive Tarceva at a standard dose of 150 milligrams daily or placebo as their first-line treatment. And what they found was there was not any real difference in the very low response rate seen in the trial. It was just 4% in the patients who got Tarceva. There was a modest difference in progression-free survival, but no difference in overall survival favoring Tarceva in that broad population. And I should say that this was an unselected population in terms of smoking status. It wasn't a group of never smokers who are highly likely to have an EGFR mutation that is associated with a very good response to a drug like Tarceva. And it wasn't a molecularly selected population of patients with an EGFR mutation who we've seen over and over are highly likely to respond well and for a very prolonged period of time on these agents. So it's really a question of, do more frail patients who don't have a strong reason necessarily to favor Tarceva, except that they don't have a good alternative, do these patients benefit enough from Tarceva to pursue it, as opposed to focusing on supportive care and symptom management as the primary focus? So, as I said, there was not a significant difference favoring Tarceva in the broader population, but the study did show an interesting finding that there were differences depending on whether patients developed a rash or not on Tarceva. And specifically in the patients who did develop a rash, which were 60% or so of the patients who got Tarceva, those patients not only did significantly better than the patients who got a placebo, they did significantly better than the patients who got Tarceva but did not develop a rash. On the other hand, the approximately 40% who didn't develop a rash did significantly worse, not only than the patients who developed a rash on Tarceva, but did worse than the patients on placebo. And so this raises the question of whether the failure to develop a rash is really especially predictive of doing well on Tarceva, or just a marker of overall likely to do poorly on anything. Perhaps it's a marker of poor immune function or overall constitution. But in any event, this result was not only seen in this study, but had been seen in several other studies with oral EGFR inhibitors like Tarceva, as well as with Iressa in the past. And it's also been seen with the EGFR antibody cetuximab, also known as Erbitux, in the FLEX trial, for instance. And so what we're really seeing now is a fairly consistent theme, that patients who develop a rash on these EGFR inhibitors do better, and the patients who don't develop a rash do worse than even the patients who never got these drugs at all. And they may be harmed by them, this suggests. So the authors of the TOPICAL study suggest that if patients don't develop a rash in the first cycle, the first month or so on Tarceva, it be discontinued and they receive supportive care and a focus on symptom management exclusively. And I think that is a reasonable consideration, although it's very hard to discontinue a treatment just a few weeks into it without seeing progression on scans. What we'd really love to see is a test that can be done before even starting the therapy that can identify the patients most likely to benefit versus a group likely to be harmed. And there is a serum-based test called Veristrat that Biodesix, as a company, is looking at, and we should see results from a trial, a prospectively designed randomized phase 3 trial with this Veristrat test at ASCO in 2013 to help clarify whether that kind of test can identify prospectively patients likely to benefit or be harmed from a drug like Tarceva, and that would certainly be a welcome development. In the meantime, I've historically been pretty wary about using Rash as a clinical decision-making factor because I've certainly seen patients who have developed a terrible rash and failed to get any improvement, who progressed very rapidly on these agents. And I also have a couple of patients who have done extremely well on oral tyrosine kinase inhibitors, but have barely developed a pimple. Nevertheless, the data do show a pretty consistent finding, and I think that is a factor that should be thought of more and more because we've seen it with so many agents in so many trials over the last decade. So that's an interesting finding, and I hope you'll find it useful as well. Take care and good luck.